Thank you, everyone, for coming back. After all these years of being a high school administrator, I felt like I was back in the lunchroom, trying to get kids to go to class on time. And it's against human nature to come back into the sanctuary after leaving. But here we are. The logistics are a little bit awkward because this is being recorded for kids who can't be here, grandkids who can't be here, for others literally all around the world that cannot be here. And so we have to film it so that the interpreter can be picked up and the microphone can pick up the voice. So it's not like we would have been in the fellowship hall where you could just sit there and we'll bring a microphone to you. You actually are going to have to make a commitment and come up the steps. So we do hope that some of you will take a few minutes to talk about Mom, and if to do so, just come up. You can sit and wait for the next person and get in line, and we are just opening that up. Did I miss anything?
Right, so if you need assistance getting up the steps, we will help you. We'll be down here watching and waiting for that. And so we want you to not come up because you find it a little bit difficult to come up the stairs. So we do appreciate having the sign language interpreters here today, as we have 2 kids who benefit from that, and I do want to thank them for being here as well. So stories, things you remember about Naomi, little snippets would be much appreciated. If you could say who you are and how you know Naomi, that would be very helpful, and I think you are welcome to take your mask off when you come up as well. So we'll just give you a few minutes to collect your thoughts, and then when someone's ready, come on up.
I'm Joy Hess. I was privileged to be in a book club for years with Naomi. She was always a suggester of good new books to read, and she was always a fine interpreter of books as well. She had a way with words, and whether it was in verbal prayers or in written thank you notes, she she had such a fine way with words. Nurses are introduced to the word empathy early in their training, and Naomi was a great practitioner. I will miss my friend, and I remember her credo, her and John's. At the end of every email, it says, "Love generously, care deeply, and speak kindly." Those were words that she took to her heart.
John Paul, Phil, Lisa, and everyone else. I'm John Lapp. We're good friends, and it all started with John for me. We grew up in eastern Pennsylvania. We were roommates at Eastern Mennonite High School. We won't tell you any stories from there. And now have been neighbors for the last 10 years with Naomi and John. And before that, we worshiped together at Lederach Mennonite Church. And one of the special joys I remember is our Sunday lunches together, usually not carving up the sermon, but celebrating life that they lived at Phil Haven and our life at Mennonite Central Committee. Naomi was a breath of fresh air, a strong woman, someone who could contribute equally to a powerful husband. And together, they made just a remarkable contribution as counselors, as a pastoral couple, and as neighbors. We often walked out the front door at Waterford Crossing, saw them on the back porch, and went down and joined them for a few minutes of conversation. And because of the declining health and because of the pandemic, whatever you call it, that's hasn't been possible in recent months. So we will deeply miss Naomi, her wisdom, her joyfulness, her devotion. And all of that has been highlighted today. John, may God be with you and your children.
My name is Vic Stoltzfus. My wife Maria and I have been friends with John and Naomi for decades, and it's been a rich friendship. I should say that the service that we experienced together here was deeply moving to me. It had so much that was appropriate and respectful, and which brought honor to her life, and even more so to the God that called her to that life. And I deeply appreciate all the planning and participation of those who made that service possible. I'm a member of a Sunday school class here called the Sojourners, and we have had a lot of really interesting speakers, a variety of topics, including Bible study. And for 12 months, a whole year, John and Naomi were invited to give a kind of pastoral summary response to what had happened in that class. And then we would have a hymn, and Sunday school would be over. They both participated in that with such apt choice of words and thoughts. They picked up on what was somebody else's theme and gave it depth. And we thank them for that richly, and we will certainly miss Naomi.
Naomi, I started to get up back there, and Naomi said, Marilyn said, what are you going to say? I don't know what you're going to say. She still doesn't.
I would just like to say that I was a classmate of Naomi's in the second nursing class at Goshen College. And at that time, we did a lot of affiliations. Naomi and I, plus several others, explored the streets of Chicago when we were there for our pediatric affiliation. And we had a great time. We had another classmate that was with us that always felt safe on the streets of Chicago because she thought if we wore the covering, nobody would disturb us. So she was she was our protection on the streets of Chicago. And we had a psych affiliation. We actually had a TB affiliation at Healthwind Hospital in South Bend, which I now think is a place much like Greencroft. At any rate, Naomi and John have been precious friends, and we've had many, many special experiences with them here in the States as well as internationally, and we'll always enjoyed John and Naomi.
Let's see if there's anything left for me to say now. I asked Marilyn this morning, what would you like to say about Naomi? And she said she was a good friend. My guess is that most of us here consider John and Naomi our best friend, or we think that we are their best friends. that was our experience. And we know that they have so many people whose lives they touched and touched very deeply and in significant ways. Just a couple of stories. Let me just say that we've known John and Naomi. John came into our lives probably 10, 15 years later after they came back from Oregon. They've touched our lives in very significant ways. We can point to at least 3 significant decisions in our lives that were kind of forks in the road, where their advice and their counsel helped us along the way and helped us make what we feel is the right decision. A couple of stories. We would I remember I tend to have visual images of stories that I remember. I remember exactly where we were standing. I was standing in our living room in Columbus, Ohio, with Naomi, and we were talking about the LGBT. I don't like to call it a thing, but the LGBT issue, and it was still an issue at that point. And they described their journey through that. And Naomi asked me about that, and I was trying to explain myself, and she said one word, no, 2 words. She said, "You're stuttering." And I was, and it was clear that I was going to need to really sit myself down and clarify my thinking on that. The other story I want to tell is that we were in, we went to the annual church meeting every 2 years, and almost invariably we met John and Naomi there. We were at the church meeting in Ames, Illinois, and we went to get some ice cream afterward, and John and Marilyn sat in the booth, and Naomi and I went up to the counter to get the ice cream cones, and there's a woman there with an ice cream cone, and we said, "That looks good. What is it?" She said what it was. I forgot what it was, but she said, "You want to taste it?" So we each took a lick, and then we got our cones and sat down, and I asked Naomi, "Who was that woman?" She said, "I don't know. I thought you knew her." Both of us had taken a lick of somebody we didn't know. Anyway, we do value their counsel, their friendship, I think if one of the things that a good friend can do is to help. Well, let me just say it a different way. I feel that we have become much more authentic people, meaning genuine and real, because that's who they are. They are genuine and real, and they encourage other people to do that. And they are looking for the good. They are looking for goodness. And I say they because it really always has been John and Naomi when we talk about them. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Alma Boyle, and I'm from Portadown in Northern Ireland. And I first met John and Naomi way back in the 90s, when they were serving with the Mennonite Central Committee, doing their peace-building work in Northern Ireland. And I never would have dreamt that here I am now living and married to a Goshen man, now living here in Goshen. So my journey with Naomi started off with John and her counselling me through a different period of my life when my marriage had broken up back in the 90s. And I always remember Naomi saying to me, Alma, you know, you need to dream new dreams. And I never dreamt that I would be standing here now. But our journey with John and Naomi goes through their journey in Northern Ireland in their peace-building work that they served so faithfully during that time. And they came then to stay in my hometown for a year. And the Greenfield Community Church that I was involved with back then, they were so supportive to us as we worked across the divide in our very divided town. And then they returned to the States, and then one of the members of the church premises got firebombed, and John, being who he is, he organised a team of volunteers from College Mennonite Church to go and support our church and to help to rebuild the premises that had been damaged. So a part of that story is one of the volunteers happened to be Jerry, and he happened to come and was accommodated at my sister and brother-in-law's home in Portadown. And thus began our journey together and the connection of our families. But Naomi was more than that to me. Naomi was almost like a second mother to me, because my mother died when I was just 29 years old, and I went through some losses in my life. And it was just how Naomi was described as that caring person, the person who you could just talk to and put her arms around you and just have those words of support and comfort. And she really did help me to dream those new dreams and to be part of our journey. And I always remember when they first came to Portadown and they came to share at our fellowship, and John and Naomi was always John and Naomi, and they shared when they spoke, you know, they finished each other's sentences. This was something new to us in Ireland. Like, you know, in Ireland, people, you know, they're generally talking above each other, you know, trying to get a word in. They're not listening. So here was this couple who were just gently standing back and waiting for the other to say. And it really was an inspiration to us. And all of their guidance and their support was so much a part of what was needed in our country at that time, and give us and the people that they work with so much support, and we're deeply, deeply grateful for that. And I came to visit in 2002 was when I first met Jerry, and we just were acquainted then, but I came to Goshen in 2003 and stayed with John and Naomi, and it just happened to be my 50th birthday. And I always remember John taking me on his recumbent bike around Goshen, me on the back, him on the front, paddling away. And we went all and circled all around, and it was before the crossing or the underpass was at Plymouth, and we were trying to negotiate across this busy road. And I always remember it's a special memory of my 50th birthday, of spending it with John and Naomi, and they had a celebration party in their home, and Jerry was invited along. And so our stories and our journey go back a long way. And I know I speak here as a representative of all the people back in Northern Ireland, and especially in my hometown, who were such close friends with John and Naomi and have that strong connection. And I was thinking about, I wanted to give John a little card, and I always remember him doing his Celtic spirituality tours, and he would have brought a group of people, and our church would have hosted them. And they went to the special sort of places in Ireland where the Celtic spirituality is very meaningful. And one of those places is the Coromila Peace and Reconciliation Centre. And the other one is Iona, on the monastery and the island of Iona. And those places, when I was starting to think about that, on the wall of the Coromila, and on one of the buildings that they have up, but they have a quote from George MacLeod, the founder of the Iona community, where he talks about those places being thin places where heaven and earth meet. And when I thought of Naomi and thought of John, and I think of Naomi's earthliness, of her servanthood, of her spreading the table, of her generosity, of her cookies, that's the earthly part, but the heavenly part was that divine part of their lives. And when you were in her company and in John's company, that's where you really felt the divine presence and where heaven and earth meet. So we're very happy that we've managed to be here for this memorial, because we just got back from Northern Ireland on Sunday evening, very late. So I'm just so glad to share in this time and to remember a very special person.
I'm Jerry Lapp, and the lucky one that got this gal, thanks to Naomi and John, literally. And one little vignette, between 2003 and 2005, something like that, when we were riding around in a car, Naomi and John, Naomi particularly, sort of was protective of Alma and kind of let me know. And so I never forgot that. And so then in 2015, in this beautiful ceremony in our yard, 2016, when we got married, Naomi and John were officiating our wedding, and it was just the most beautiful circumstance. And afterwards, Naomi remembered that incident, and she asked for forgiveness for that, which was unneeded, obviously. It was just one of those such enjoyable aspects of her humanity and her beauty. And I'm so reminded today how the radiance of one's being just comes back like tsunamis, reverberating over and over and outward, far beyond one's circumference. And it's just a beautiful reminder. Thank you so much.
Just a little note on the wedding ceremony just reminded me of John. It was such an honour for John and Naomi to agree to marry us in the new yard, because we had such a history. But John, I don't know whether it was deliberate or not, John, but there was something about you admitted Jerry saying the vows. Do you remember that? And we laughed about that afterwards, because we were just so caught up in the moment that this was just something, oh, you didn't say your vows, Jerry. So we always laughed at that whenever we came to visit Naomi and John, and it's just a special memory, and we have so many. So thanks so much to both of you.
Hello, I'm Lori Clanton, and I met Beth Lederach 30 years ago, and it's been 27 years since our commitment ceremony. And one of the reasons I'm such an advocate for gay marriage is because I thought everyone should have the right to a mother-in-law. And I was so fortunate to have Naomi as a mother-in-law, and just what a blessing. And we've done extended vacations with John and Naomi. Not everyone can say that they loved that with their in-laws. And I did, and we did a long trip to Northern Ireland in the late 90s. John and Naomi would come and spend a couple of weeks at our house at a time, and I loved it. And 10 years ago, I planned a surprise trip to San Francisco for Beth's 50th birthday with John and Naomi. And unbeknownst to Beth, John and Naomi flew out to San Francisco, and they were on a bench in a park where we took our daughters to play. And so I'm walking Beth and Nona Lisa and Eliza down the streets in San Francisco, and what a surprise for them to see John and Naomi on this bench. And we had a wonderful few days in San Francisco, and we still walk by that bench today. We will. So I just want to say how grateful I am to have married into the Lederach family and gotten John and Naomi as my in-laws.
We're Robert and Lydia Burton, and we met John and Naomi in Winston-Salem, North Carolina in the 60s. Rob and John were in the clinical pastoral education program, but we happened to live in the same apartment building as John and Naomi. And they had 3 children then, and we had a 3-month-old. And Naomi was so helpful to me with a 3-month-old. And I remember on a couple of occasions she suggested that Rob and I go out and just have some couple time. And she took care of Grace. And we had a good time, so I'm very thankful. She was just a really good friend during that year, and I'm very thankful to have known her.
My exposure to John and Naomi both as a naive and Southern Baptist boy was the first time I really had run into people who were peace activists. And that really changed my thinking from then on, and so I'm grateful for that. 2 stories about that. One was the classic question is, what are you going to do if somebody comes after your grandmother? And their answer was, well, you don't know my grandmother. And the other was, the boys were school age then, and so this is in North Carolina where there's probably the only Mennonites were named Lederach at the time down there. And so the teacher asked them about the Mennonites, and one of the boys explained, well, we're peace activists. We are against war. And the teacher said, that's good. We need more people like that. And I want to give thanks that because of John and Naomi, there are some more people like that.
Hello, my name is Margaret Glick-Metzler, and I've been sitting there debating whether I would share something or not. So many of you are strangers to me, but I was a classmate of Naomi's at Heston Academy High School. And if I'm not mistaken, I'm the only member here to represent that class. So I'm so thankful for this service this afternoon. Thank you, family, for preparing such an inspirational time. And I want to go home and prepare my plans. But besides saying I was Naomi's classmate, high school kids, you know, we had lots of fun. But I was also in the quartet that sang Children of the Heavenly Father. And so that brought back a lot of memories for me. Another thing I've been debating is whether I may tell something about John Paul, because I think Naomi would approve. My husband, John Paul, doesn't know this, I don't think, but maybe he'll enjoy it. Anyway, my husband and I were teaching English in China, oral English, and we had one particular student who was so keen and active and worked so hard, and it happened that we had a couple of tapes, inspirational tapes of some kind by John Paul Lederach. And he borrowed them, and he took them home, and he studied and studied. He was preparing for a contest, a provincial English language contest. And he told us before that took place that he had to give that speech in front of the school officials. And when he finished the speech, he was criticized by one of the professors, because he said, we must rely on God to help us in our lives, or something to that effect. And this critic said, you can't mention anything about God because we don't believe in God in China. So I just want to say, Naomi would be glad to know that story, and I hope you are too. Thank God for her life.
I'm Lori Retoff. I am Naomi's niece. My mother was her older sister. And so I've known Naomi as long as I can remember, and John, forever. Our lives overlapped for about 10 years in Heston, Kansas. So I was the wonderful recipient of receiving parenting from John and Naomi, as well as my parents. Beth and I were best of friends and were inseparable for 10 years. So she went from Beth and Lori to Beth and Lori, the brunette to the blonde. Naomi has always, and John, I could say Naomi and John for all of this, an incredible confidant, friend. We laughed together, went through tough times together. Gave me great advice, gently encouraged me, everything I needed at all the right times. So it has been a wonderful ride. She has been like a second mother to me. She has given me roots, a stable ground, and wings to soar. In the last 10 years, when my mom had her stroke and illness, and then both my parents died, I would have fun with Naomi. I remember, this was probably 10 years ago, in her garage, she was saying, well, you know, Lori, I have my service all planned. And I said, wow. And I said, so you still have me singing Ave Maria, right? And she looks at me and then realizes I'm joking, because number one, I'm a second alto. Number two, I don't have a solo voice. So it was a wonderful joke, and throughout the years, I would text her or call her and say, well, Naomi, I am going to need a lot of time to prepare this. I've just got a new part of the song that it's with the tuba and a second alto, and I'm going to have to work on it for a long time. I'm looking for another arrangement, so I need a lot more time. So we would laugh about this. Anyway, so Naomi, she's probably very relieved that there was no Ave Maria today, and I kept my mouth shut and I played a Bach prelude in C major.
My name is Jan Siemens, and if I were asked to give a title to Naomi, I think it would be Saint of Encouragement. she just so earned it by who she was. I love that smile because it's the one she used so often. And 3 quick things, the way she influenced me. One of them was when we were with Mennonite Central Committee in Jerusalem, and it was in the early 80s, and we had 2 young children. And some of you have commented about her ability to connect with young children. And during those years, there was so much going on in Jerusalem in our jobs, and it was a big job, and it was so nice to have chances to talk with Naomi and to be encouraged by her. You could count on it. You could count on her wanting to know what we were doing and being very interested. The other is kind of an interesting one, and again, that smile is what greeted us when we'd go to concerts here at Souder Center. John in one place and Naomi in the other. And somehow that hug before the concert made the concert twice as good. It just was something about a real genuine meeting and a real smile. And the third thing I want to share is I moved to Goshen when my daughter was facing a journey with cancer, and I had just retired from MCC, and they have this policy that with their insurance, you could have 3 counseling sessions on them. I don't know if 3 is all you need, but that's what their policy was. And so I knew that John and Naomi were in Goshen, and I knew that they were counselors, and so the call was made, would they be at all open to receiving this MCC stipend for the counseling? They said, well, no. They had some time, they were retired, but it wasn't about money. They didn't want MCC's money, but they would listen and talk to me, and I shall always be grateful. I don't know if it was every other week or 3 weeks in between the sessions, but how they knew what to check in about, and somehow that team, I don't know exactly how they communicated, but if John didn't ask the question, Naomi did. They covered the bases, and they heard each other, and especially heard me. So it might have to be saint of encouragement and listening. What a woman. I will miss Naomi.
I'm Don Blosser. Beth, in your presentation this morning, which was fabulous, you said we ought to talk about John and Naomi together as though it's one phrase. I need to do that for a moment. John, you remember you and Naomi, we were part of a small group at church for years and years and years and years. I don't think anybody on earth knows Carolyn and me as well as John and Naomi did. When we had the kind of normal problems that show up in a functioning marriage, Carolyn would often say, no, let's go talk to John and Naomi, because she knew that Naomi had this very quiet way of saying, Don, you're not listening to Carolyn. And she said it in a way that you couldn't get angry with her, because she usually was right. One other thing. John, you will remember, I imagine so. Some years ago, we referred one of the members of our family to you and Naomi for some marriage help, and you saved their marriage. Carol and I are very grateful and thankful that we have had John and Naomi as good, caring colleagues in faith. Thank you, John.
I'm Charlotte Croyle. I have one claim to fame. Naomi and I look alike. No, I don't think so, but for years people thought so. It's the funniest thing. I think it's because I had hair, like Beth said, pulled back in a beautiful big bun in the back. Naomi and I
Naomi followed me as a student at Heston. Then she followed me here. I was in the first nursing class, she was in the second one. And at Heston, people would say, "Are you related to Charlotte Hertzler?" "No." "Well, you look like her." And then here at Goshen College, in the nursing program for years, people would come up to her and, "Are you related to Charlotte Hertzler?" And they'd say to me, "Are you related to Naomi Kaufman?" No. And you know what? I retired in '95, and they came back to Goshen too later than that. And on the hallway here at church, we didn't have buns anymore. They'd come up to me from the back and they'd say, "Naomi." Don't ask me why, because we don't look alike anymore at all. Anyway, Naomi and John, I'm like everybody else. Ellis and I thought you were among our best friends, for good reason.
I'm John Paul, and I'd like to thank all of you for coming. It's been a wonderful few hours. Beth got into some stories that said something about Phil and I being a handful, and I thought I might fill those out a bit more, because I think I learned most everything about international negotiation and conflict transformation, not only from my mom and dad, but especially from my mom, because she was the one at the coalface of the fights between my brother and I. We literally one time stopped a train that was traveling from Oregon to Chicago by getting ourselves somehow locked into a bathroom. I don't know how Mom actually survived continental trips on a train with the two of us. But my one recollection, actually two. First one was that one time when we were having a particularly go-at-it session, she had found this thing that I think was published maybe in one of the church newspapers that had a picture of all of Joseph's brothers looking very ugly and mean at Joseph. And she pinned it up on a wall and made us sit and look at the picture. I don't know, Phil, if you remember. And what I recall was that it didn't work. So then she went to round two, and round two was that we had to sit in these tiny little chairs in front of a mirror and just look at ourselves. And I only remember the words that she would say, which was, "I want you to know what mean looks like." And it probably worked because we started laughing hysterically a few minutes into it, and I think it shifted it. My other one was that Beth was, in her extraordinary sharing this morning, was very, very moving for me. She talked about oatmeal and cream of wheat. I was the cream of wheat guy. I didn't like lumps, and Phil was the oatmeal guy. And Mom, for some years, would do both. But one day she decided that she had enough of that, and so she only made oatmeal. And I came down to breakfast and said I wanted cream of wheat. She said, "I made oatmeal today." And I said, "Well, I want cream of wheat." She said, "I made oatmeal today." And she said, "Well, that's the way it's going to be. It's the way it's going to be." And I said, "Well, if you don't make me cream of wheat, I'm going to run away from home." And she said, "Well, the door's right there." So I looked at her, didn't have any more words. I got up out of my chair and I went out the door and I ran. This is in Oregon. I ran past the garage to the grapevine area. We had a big grapevine, and I hid in the grapevines. And it was about the time I was underneath the grapevine that I realized I had run away from home only in my underwear, which is not the wisest of things to do. And so I kept thinking, she's going to come get me. She's going to come get me. And she didn't. So I tail tucked in my underwear, came back to the house and ate my oatmeal. And I often say that's the day I learned about international negotiations. Don't threaten a bluff if you are going to follow through on it. And that's what gets us in far too much trouble all the time. Mom, for me, was, I agree, the great encourager. I don't think there was anything I ever wrote of significance that she didn't read. My first book in English, she did all of the page-by-page editing prior to it being sent into the publisher. And there were often combinations of corrections that she would catch, but also interactions around ideas that were, for me, very profound. And she was always there. She had a way of letting you know you were special. And I think that's what we've carried into parenting. That encouragement goes a long way. Especially for people to find a way to really be true to themselves, which is what I found always with Mom and Dad. The last few weeks obviously were hard. I use the words harrowing and holy and harrowing. It's like a sacred space. But it's a mysterious place. She came through it with a lot of grace. I think in the big picture, and we talked about it a lot, that long Miller genealogy, where the women in particular seem to find a way to live to 100 years. Everyone thought that, and Mom included, probably Dad, that Mom would live longer. Mom, the nurse, would take care of Dad. And it was the other way. And Mom showed enormous grace in her most vulnerable times. And Dad showed amazing compassion and persistence and alongsideness that I think I'll carry with me forever. And I appreciate that from both of them. So that's it. Thank you. Why don't you stay here with me, Philip?
I think that it would be most appropriate if I would say a word at the end. I think that John Paul was right. I think Naomi thought in her mind up to the last couple weeks that I would be the one to go first and she would be the one to care for me. but that was not to be so. I think the greatest gift that I've ever received in my life is the gift of Naomi's love. And that love was so complete. The last days of her life, I should say the last hours of her life, she revived, sat up, and hugged each one of the children. Not just a hug and a pat, but a deep, profound hug. And then she came to me, and she reached over to me and put her arms around me and hugged me. I can still sort of feel. She laid back in bed, and that afternoon, late that night, she died. We watched her take her last breath. I wondered after she was gone the next night whether I would dream. Now, I'm not a big believer in dreams that have projections or predictions. I think that dreams much more show what's inside of me. And let me back up and say that on many evenings, I would kneel beside the bed and hold her hand. The second night after our dream, after that she had died, my dream that night was that I was in the bed and she was kneeling beside me, holding my hand. I carried that idea through the day and thought about it a lot, and how I missed her and what that might mean. And again, I say it's no projection, it's much more internal. What was going on inside of me? The next night, I had another dream, and in that dream, we were traveling with a place like the old city of Corinth that we had visited several times, but especially we visited one time alone, in the ruins of Corinth, off in the background. And we were standing together listening to the guide talk about those ruins of Corinth, the city of Corinth. And then we turned, and the guide and Naomi walked away from me in my dream. And I was standing alone. And they walked together down the road, and that was the last I saw of her in that dream. I think that maybe what it was saying is that after this long life together of like the 24/7 for 68 years, now she was walking away. And she was in good hands, and I can trust that. The verse that we put in the front of the program, but we have a goodly heritage. A goodly heritage. And I kept saying to Naomi during these last days, and your resurrection, like Beth said today, is in your children and your grandchildren and all of those people in different parts of the world that our lives have touched. That's the resurrection. It's good for me to stand here and look at you and say that thank you for coming out for this time of memorial, time of remembering Naomi. And I thank you for your friendship to us. And I pray and hope that the friendship memories will linger on and that you will think about what it means for me to journey now. See her off in the distance, but she walks now in our hearts. Thanks be to God. Thank you for coming.
There's no better place to end. Thank you. Bless you.